Welcome to the Pink Dress Podcast Effect with Shannon
and Kim.
Yeah, we are on episode 5. Wow, we're getting close to those double digits, Kim.
Halfway there.
Yeah. But we're here today. We're going to talk about, I think it'd be an uncomfortable topic sometimes, like with people, like about solitude and being alone. Yeah. I think people who do know me, they know I love people and I love being around people. I get my energy from people. But it's not necessarily talking to people. So sometimes it can just be them in my vicinity.
Yeah.
And I don't have to say a word. But this is truly alone, like straight up alone. And I wanted to share something that happened to me recently, I guess, spending some time alone. I hadn't done that in a long, long time. I got a new job, and I was traveling a lot, driving to a lot of rural parts of South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. So I spent hours and hours and hours in the car, and sometimes I didn't have the radio on, sometimes I did, but I went to school to, I was going to be a news anchor, that's what I thought I wanted to do. But one of the things about being alone, I was driving one day on a back road, I think in South Carolina, and I felt like this voice that said, you need to be on the radio. And I know I attribute that to all the time and the hours that I was alone. And I think that where that came from is when I did an internship when I was in college. I did a radio show, and I absolutely loved it. But in my heart, I was going to be on TV. And I think I wasn't listening to my voice that we often don't do, especially when you're younger. That maybe that wasn't a glamorous enough, whatever, but I was able to be myself, and I loved it. It brought me so much joy. So anyway, and then, we started talking about the podcast and things like that, and so here we are. So, but had I not been alone...
Yes.
That was there because, I've been in college for how many years?
Yeah.
That's been there lying dormant for so many years because I was so busy with life. So this was a blessing for me, I think.
You couldn't even hear yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a blessing that comes with being alone.
Yes. And I think for me, the greatest time of solitude that I learned the most it was kind of not willingly self-imposed solitude. I was kind of physically, I have fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, and I was physically at my absolute worst, and I couldn't work. I got to the point where I wasn't able to work, and I didn't work for 9 months. And during that time...
Was it 9 months?
It was 9 months.
Oh, my gosh.
It was a long time.
Wow.
But it was the absolute best,
like when
most
you look
transformative time of my life, looking back. When I went into it, it was the absolute worst time of my life, but I was alone. And I just had the time because I wasn't working. I spent a great deal of the day alone, in my house by myself. And I really just got to really be in my own thoughts.
Get to know yourself.
Getting to know myself, figuring out how I was going to reclaim my health, talking to God, praying about my health, and really listening and getting to the place where I was able to make decisions that propelled my life forward.
Wow, that's awesome. That's really powerful. Why do you think people, run from it?
Because, look, if you look at solitude, a lot of people equate solitude with loneliness. Mm-hmm. And it's not the same thing.
Two different things, right?
Two different things, and I do have a definition for that. Solitude is defined as the state of being alone versus loneliness, which is sadness because one doesn't have friends or company.
Ooh.
So solitude and loneliness are not the same thing.
So do you think solitude, like, I'm going to, the next month, I'm going to really limit my interactions with people in my life. You're going into it as, in your case, you were sick.
Yes.
You didn't go into it purposely. But once you were in it, obviously you were in it. But, like, some people, like, specifically say, I'm going to take the next month to focus on me.
And a healthy person would do that. And I think had I been implementing that throughout my life and taking the opportunities for solitude, I would not have gotten to a crisis point. Where I then, it's kind of like God sits you down. You don't listen. And then you're sat down where you have no choice.
You had no choice.
But to listen.
Because you were so sick.
Yeah. But if I was taking those opportunities to have solitude throughout, I don't think I would have gotten to that point.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
What a great, I mean, and you talked about in our previous episode about, I know you like to go for walks.
Yes.
With nature.
Yes.
Which is very...
But that's new within the last year, and I resisted. Sky was the first person to suggest that to me, and I was too busy. And I was like, I don't have time for this.
And were you too busy, you were looking at it more like exercise versus this is good for my mind? Because it sounds like obviously you're doing it for exercise, but I know you've talked about, I sit on a bench, I reflect, I pray about my life, I look at nature. But I
wasn't doing any of that. I was just in the rat race of life with, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to make it happen, I have to do all these things. And I was not spending any time reflecting on what I wanted from my life or why I was doing the things that I was doing. I was just in it. I was on that wheel, that hamster wheel that's spinning around in circles. I was on that wheel.
And I think maybe for me, that was kind of like the blessing when I did get a new opportunity, because my other job was so busy.
Yes.
And being a single mom, all the time. And then my son was an athlete too. And there was I would go to the gym, but it was a class. So your music's playing. There wasn't a lot of alone me time.
Yes.
And now I have it.
Yep.
It's kind of scary though sometimes, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think, I read this article, and I think it was in The Greater Good, and it talked about when you go into solitude, if you go from a place of fear, then it cannot be a good thing.
Why do you think people are afraid?
I think because they associate it with being lonely. And,
and not like it's a good thing for growth, maybe.
Yeah, no, the fear of being alone and by yourself. Which, society, you're meant to be connected to people.
God made us that way.
I absolutely.
What do they say? Two are better than one.
Yes. I mean, we're meant to be connected. But you are also meant to spend some time alone. But if you haven't learned how to do that, then it can be fearful. And sometimes, look, we talked about the last episode too. You're running from the stuff in your life.
Oh.
And so if you don't want to think about the stuff in your life, being alone is not a good thing.
No.
Let me keep myself busy. Let me work.
However, right. So you still could be alone doing those things. I mean, you can work alone. You can, my job, I do spend a lot of time alone, but I mean, you can do still a lot of things alone, but you're not taking that
reflection
time to reflect. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think overcoming that fear, you really do have to look at it from a different perspective. You have to be able to shift your mindset about that. Because, being alone or having that time of solitude can spark creativity. And that's one of the things that I learned also when I was at home. And the poems that I wrote, I published one and it's on my Instagram. And I keep saying that I'm going to publish all of them and kind of talk about what was going on in my life at the time that I publish them. But they talk about, some of the great people who have been in solitude throughout history and were these creative geniuses. And that solitude does contribute to that. But you look at, like your Mozart and your Einstein and your Picasso and, maybe there's some other struggles that are going along with that creativity. But, when you do, for me in that particular circumstance, being in a time of solitude, because of the introspection that was going on, it was an incredibly painful time. And in order to process the pain that I was experiencing, I wrote and I did the poems. So it did spark the creativity, which ultimately led me out of it. I was able to get through it.
And it took you the full 9 months, you think? I mean, or do you think it was longer, like once you started getting better, where you were ready to go back to work and things like that?
I think, for the great thing, I think, is that the real first I spent about the first month on a total pity party and being angry and upset with God and all those things. And then I began to embrace the experience. And I think I really came out on the other side of it probably around 6 months into the process, where I started kind of embracing it. I was starting to heal physically.
So do you think the beginning it wasn't necessarily solitude? Was it loneliness, or it just is what it was? Like,
it just is what it was.
And then it kind of turned into where solitude became a benefit.
Yeah. Well, you don't, even now just being still, it's one of my favorite, kind of verses from the Bible, but just being still is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
And when you're forced to be still, when you weren't looking to be still and didn't want to be still, then you have to look at all your stuff. And then sometimes that's not a good feeling. And so that's one of the reasons why people can have some fear about embracing solitude. But the flip side is, on the other side of it, my entire life changed.
Wow. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a beautiful
you
thing.
You can't ask for better.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it changed in so many different ways.
Oh, I can't. It changed physically, during that time. There was a certain way of eating that I embraced that physically, healed. I won't say it cured fibromyalgia or the chronic fatigue, because I still really not like before.
Because used to, it was like clockwork every holiday season.
Man, I tried everything.
Every winter.
It would get worse. Yeah. And I tried everything, every medicine, every therapy, went to specialists like in Charlotte, and it was not working because I was not dealing with my life. There are some people who say that fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, because it's one of those disorders that they really can't pinpoint what causes it, that it can be like all of that stored emotion. Oh, and,
okay.
Because they're learning more about how like trauma impacts you physically and how you can kind of store all of that in your body and not kind of dealing with your stuff.
Makes sense.
Can it take
like
a toll?
Yeah,
right? It takes a toll on you physically, like stress. How stress can impact you physically. It's almost like all this stored stress over time just weakens your body and your immune system. And so I think having that solitude allowed for me to process a lot of buried emotions and focus on my physical healing through diet, and just to really implement practices in my life that were healthier for me.
No, and I agree. Yeah. And I think as we move into this new year, it might not be a bad thing for people to do. And I know for myself, that's something that I have. I think I've spent a lot of time alone, I think, in the last few months. And it messes with you a little bit. It makes you reflect on your stuff, like Kim said. And it's not comfortable.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll say to me, because I'll say I just want to be alone. Like, I just want to be alone. And you're like, it's great. There's all these benefits of being alone, but, do you really want to be alone?
Yeah.
But, and there's certain seasons in life, I think, too, where you just crave loneliness, or not loneliness, but aloneness. And I think for myself, I had packed my life so full of things and responsibilities and demands that all I was craving was to be alone.
To be alone, yeah. Where me now, I've kind of gone the opposite with my son in college and the job that I have now. I do travel. That's another thing with the job I have now. There's a lot of alone. There's just a lot of, you go to a meeting in another state, but then you're going to a hotel by yourself. And you're sitting in this hotel room, and I never put the TV on. I think of all the trips I've been on, maybe one time.
Yeah.
But I don't even put the TV on. And a lot of times will read a self-help or something, or reflect. There's just been a lot. Yeah. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. But I have grown a lot in the last couple of years. So maybe I can attribute it to that change.
Getting more and more comfortable and realizing there isn't anything to fear.
No. Like we talked about, even sometimes people, one of the things I've never done, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. I should do it. I'm going to make a goal to do it before the end of January. So, with traveling alone, I eat alone a lot. And I got over that a long time ago, way before this job, because my other job was so busy. I had to eat alone sometimes. But I've never been to a movie theater by myself, ever. And I know that's not like solitude. Kind of it is.
No, it is. It really is.
But to me, it feels, even thinking about it, feels uncomfortable. Let me go watch a movie by myself. But why not? I see people in there. They want to go see a movie. Why do you got to wait for somebody else? I want to go see that movie. What if I can't find anybody that wants to see that movie?
You still want to see the movie.
I'm going to go. Yeah. I'm going to do it. And I feel uncomfortable thinking about it. Because you talked about that.
Right. Is it because society says, well, you should be going with someone.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, just like we talked about, you're like, I've never eaten at a bar by myself.
No, and I just did that for the first time this year.
And it was not bad, was it?
No, I was so proud of myself. I was so proud. I went to a hotel. It was after my oldest daughter got married. And it was just a super, super busy time. And I was going full throttle and just really wanted to be alone. Mm-hmm. And so I had two people in my life. One was my employer and one was my mom. They suggested maybe you should go and just like get away. And by the time the second person said it, I said, maybe I need to get away.
Yeah.
And I did. Yeah. And I just checked myself into a hotel for a couple of days. And one of the things I did was just to go down to the bar and just have a drink by myself. And, met people and talked to people. Yeah. But that is not something I ever would have done. And
when I travel, I will go sit down at a table. But I've also gone to the bar. And I've met some really neat people.
Yeah.
Like around the country, traveling, that I maybe otherwise wouldn't. But I've been comfortable in that realm for a long time. But yeah.
Not the movies yet.
Not the movies, but something else that I've been thinking about before we even decided to do this topic is I love the beach.
Yes.
And I've been thinking in the winter, the rates are lower and there's not a lot of people there. And I've been thinking about going away even if it's just a Saturday morning drive there, spend the night and stay the next day. There's something healing about the beach to me.
Oh, yes.
And even in the winter, it's cold.
Yeah.
But if I have to look at it from my hotel room.
Well, even just walking. I walked, at the lake the other day and it was cold. And just the feeling of, the wind and it's really cold and it makes you feel alive.
It does make you feel alive.
So, yeah.
So I've been thinking about doing that in January, early February this year, too. Yeah. I think I'm embracing being alone. Not alone. Solitude. I don't want to be lonely.
Well, and it can be alone. And being alone is not the same as loneliness,
and I just don't want to be, nobody wants to be lonely. Who wants to be lonely?
Nobody wants to be sad.
No, and I know I have so many amazing people in my life. So between my family and my close friends that there's not a time that I would need to feel sad and alone. I can call them on the phone. God, I can't talk. And they would be there in a minute for me because they wouldn't want me to be sad.
Yeah.
But to do it, to be our underarching theme, I think the best version of ourselves, I think it's so healthy.
Well, and to tie in with that, one of the things that I realized when I had that time of solitude, which ties into being the best version of yourself and being authentic, is that I realized that I had been wearing a mask.
Oh.
And that so much of my life, really my entire life, at that point I was, I say 46, but I think I was actually 48. I realized that the majority of decisions I had made in my life were based off of what I was supposed to do, what I thought other people wanted me to do. And that I didn't even know what I wanted or what I should be doing.
Yeah.
Because I spent so much time focusing on what other people thought I should be doing or what they thought of what I was doing and judging myself for what I was doing and feeling bad about myself, that I really realized that I had not been living my own life.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I think so many people are probably caught up in all that.
Yeah. Yeah, because society has all these rules.
They do. Don't leave that job. It's got great benefits. Okay, but I'm miserable. Like, why? Why would you stay? Like, right? I mean, I think I've gotten to that point where I just feel like, whatever.
Yeah, and being, I would get caught up in this too, and being a mom. And okay, so you're a mom, and I remember, look. I would do all the things. I would try to be that mom who's doing the crafts and doing all, and going to the park but I was not that mom. And finally, I just, let their dad take over the park duties, and I would buy them arts and craft kits. But I spent a lot of time saying, okay, society says you should do this. And then I would try my very best to do that and then realize, okay, that doesn't work for me. But when, you do so many aspects of your life like that you just, it comes to a crisis point.
Don't you think you add a marriage, your children,
all
what
that,
kind
of wife
job,
you should be.
You just, I think you forget who you are.
Yeah.
And so going back to solitude and some alone time, even if your life is crazy and busy like that, start taking some time. Go sit in a closet. I mean, like, I know somebody used to do that. Even for 30 minutes, go sit in a closet. Like, just be alone for a little while.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
And one of the things I used to do as a mom with small children, and I can't even remember what age they were when I started doing this, and I remember, you might even have said something to me about it, but when I started telling them when I come home from work, don't bother me for 30 minutes.
Oh, did you?
I need
Look, I'm
30 minutes. Look, I know you probably said something then. You were probably judging me then about it.
I was one of those moms. No.
I know.
I don't remember you ever saying that to me. I remember you were saying, when they grow up.
No, yeah.
I remember saying, you said, I can't wait till they grow up. And I was like, I can't believe she just said that. Like, I don't know, maybe our kids, because my son's a couple years younger than your youngest. So
yeah.
How old do you think they were? I don't know. Trey might have been 6.
Oh.
I don't know. They were little.
They were little.
Yeah.
And
I remember thinking, you can't wait till they grow up.
I know.
Look.
But I'm guilty of that. And I think,
but at least you were honest.
No, but I think what I think it comes from? Because I was so busy living an inauthentic life.
Oh, right.
I couldn't wait to find some other version of life.
That part would be over.
Right. That part would be, and I would compartmentalize this. Okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to be a great mom and I'm going to do all the things. But I was telling someone recently, and this is probably another future episode, but it wasn't really present in my life. I was kind of checking boxes.
Don't you think a lot of people do that?
No, I think a lot of people do
I know that I was once that person and it was literally the motions. Yeah. Get up, and I'm like, I don't want to go back to that girl.
But solitude causes you to reflect on those things. Yeah. And so
maybe fear too, right?
Fear.
Fear's such a
Well, fear too, and you look at, what if you really don't know who you are? So
I mean, not to cut you up, but I mean, even like this podcast. I mean, that thought came in my head, and I love to talk and all the things, but it's still scary.
Yes.
And it's still fear-based when you're talking about stuff that's your stuff to strangers, and you have to limit it and be careful, but it's still scary because you're vulnerable.
Yes, you're being way more vulnerable. Like when y'all are hearing this now, you're hearing a lot of our, like, this is how we talk to each other.
We do.
Yeah, so
we're keeping some of that stuff private. Obviously, we're not going to put all our stuff out there.
Can't put all our business in the streets.
Exactly. But we do, and it's like, I don't know. It's fear and all that stuff, I think.
Yeah. It solitude allows you to connect with your own vulnerability, and people run from being
and maybe
vulnerable.
Learn to trust yourself.
Yeah,
that your feelings, thoughts, desires, all those things are yours, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I agree with you. We do spend a lot of time running, and I know our previous episode we talked a lot about that. It's uncomfortable to feel your stuff, though. Like we said, it's just thinking about things I want to work on. It's like, it brings up a lot.
Yeah.
It brings up a lot, and it's scary.
Yeah. And so I would just say, embracing it. And how do you shift from just overcoming the fear?
Yeah.
And, the initial stages of looking at solitude, looking at being alone. And then how do you shift into embracing it? And, one of the things I know for me was really changing your mindset. And a lot of people will use affirmations and things they say to themselves. So instead of saying, I am alone, or I am lonely, you can say, I'm choosing to spend this time with myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just a shift in your mind. How
that's
you
a
choose
positive
to. Yeah.
Look at it.
And
especially if you're doing it for the greater good of yourself.
Yes.
Is that even bad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
It's not bad.
But if you fear going into it, you won't look at it as a choice. You'll look at it kind of as an imposition, something somebody put onto you, and now you're in a state of being alone. And even from before the example I gave, I was pushed into it by my circumstances, and I could have stayed there. And we talked last episode, you could stay in it, you can get depressed, you can do all those things.
And then not live your life.
Or you can embrace it and look for the opportunities for growth in that season of your life. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm all about that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're definitely wanting to do that. And so let's look at some ways. Okay, what are some of the concrete things that you can do to embrace solitude? And one of the things I was talking with you about earlier was, look, there are going to be people out there, and I know people in my life who 1,000% do not like to be alone. They like to be around other people, and they like to keep themselves occupied with other people, and they just don't embrace that. And then there are people who are naturally inclined to be alone, like myself. Right. You know, during COVID, when it first hit,
did you love it?
I was one of the first people. It was before the vaccines. Everybody's like terrified for their life, but and I got COVID during the holidays. And so at that time we were quarantining for 10 days.
That's right.
And I had to go in the room for 10 days. Well, it didn't faze me one bit to be by myself. Look, I didn't want to come out.
You could have faked it back then.
Yeah. So you're going to have people all the way from me who just loves to be alone to people who just don't want to do it at all. So for people who just do not like being alone, look for those times when you're just naturally alone.
Yeah.
Like when you're in your car or you're taking a bath.
Yeah.
You know, those times when you can allow yourself to kind of process your thoughts.
Do you think
you're naturally alone?
Yeah. Do you think at those times, though, is it like you go into those moments of solitude saying, I'm going to reflect on, I don't know, what I want my next job to look like?
Yes.
I mean, do you think you should go into it with a purpose?
I think you should be intentional.
Intentional, okay.
Yes. Whatever the time is and however you choose to use it, I do believe you need to be intentional.
You know what? Because maybe if you're not intentional, I was just thinking, like, you go into it and you say, okay, from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock today, I'm going to be intentional about what I'm thinking about, whether it's journaling, whatever, versus not being intentional about it. You're wrapped up and you're sad about whatever.
Yes.
And then you start thinking about whatever you're thinking about that's making you sad, and you can get stuck.
Yes.
And then maybe that turns into the loneliness and depression and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I like that. I didn't think about having a set time for solitude.
Yeah. And people do it. You know, people pray in the mornings. They have set times for that. They have set times for meditation. And meditation, I've talked about like calm.com forever. I've used it. And there are meditations that you can 3 minutes. So
oh wow, calm.com.
Yes.
I have to try that.
And so you can 3 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever the ratio of time that you have, start practicing. So for people who don't like to do it, begin to practice, small increments of being intentional about the time that you spend in solitude.
Okay.
The journaling we talked about in other episodes. It's just those times when it's you and your thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't run from them.
Don't run from them. And, for us, we've talked before, we're women of faith. The time that you spend with your own thoughts and talking with God about, what is his purpose for your life and how can that show up, in your daily life.
Yeah.
So, and, I talked about the sound baths. Those, for me.
I want to do that next time you go.
Yes.
Let me know.
You're going.
Well, I know I was going to go, and I got sick, unfortunately. And you can still hear it in my voice.
Yeah.
But,
and one of the best experiences with the sound bath, they don't do it. It's at Glow Fitness in Raleigh, but it's not always going on. But one of the sessions I went to was on your healing your inner child. And you'll see that a lot on like Instagram and social media and all that.
Well, don't you think that's where a lot of our stuff comes from?
Yeah, it's but it was such a guided meditation that you saw like a younger version of yourself, and you were able to kind of love on them and talk, lovingly to them. And it was such an emotional experience that I didn't anticipate. It wasn't even the normal experience that I had, but I really appreciated that alone time was very impactful for me. So just looking at where those opportunities present themselves. It might just be, going and, waiting in your car.
Yeah.
Before you transition to the, your next location. I'm a big person who sits in the car.
I do too. My son, it was funny. He would pull in from wherever, basketball practice, whatever. And I could hear the garage door go up, and I'm like,
where is he?
I'm like, what is he doing? And then it dawned on me when he would drive with me, I'd get out of the car, I'm like, what are you doing? And he's on his phone, doing whatever. And I'm doing that now. Before I get in the house to go clean or do whatever, I'm sitting there. And I know it's probably not really intentional.
Yeah, because they do talk about like having a digital detox.
Yes.
Is also a good way.
One of my best friends, actually, I talked to her yesterday from childhood. She said that over the holidays, that's what she did. She really focused on staying away from social media. She said, I think she looked at it a little bit, but like pretty much just, she said she needed to reset.
Yeah.
She needed to focus on her family, her little immediate family, her life. Work had been really stressful. She didn't need any distractions. And when I got off the phone with her, I mean, there's days that I don't look at social media, but I mean, I look at it just like everybody else a lot.
I think I pretty much look every day.
Yeah. Most of the time I do. Every once in a while, it might be a day or two if I'm really busy. But yeah, it's a big part of your life. And when you take that out, and she said it really helped her.
Yeah.
It really helped her in just that solitude away from that.
And looking and comparing your life to other people's lives and, and being able to be present in your own life.
Yeah, we were all put here for different reasons, right? And,
yeah. Definitely.
And so maybe take some time and get that solitude that will help you, and the intentional solitude, which I really like, that'll help you really figure out what it is that you're desiring of your heart, whether it's for your job or anything, right? It can be anything.
It can be anything.
Getting you back on track in the fitness world.
What's important to you?
What's important to you? Yeah, I love it.
And being thankful, thankful for the opportunity to be alone and to have the time to kind of really spend with yourself. And so instead of looking at it as a negative experience, being thankful that you have that opportunity.
Yeah. Well, Kim, that's another episode behind us. That was good. Deep.
Yeah.
There's some deep topics coming. But I am super excited for our next topic. It is about, are you too old? Look, this one is going to be a good one, and I think more upbeat, if you will, the topic, because even like this podcast, we've had multiple people tell us, you're too old, like kind of thing.
50-year-old women, what are y'all doing out there?
50-year-old women. Well, what are we doing? We are living our lives, and we're going after a dream. And you know what? Too bad too many other people don't do the same damn thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Am I allowed to say that?
Yes, you are.
But anyway, it fires me up because, like, you're not too old. You're not too old. Look at all the success stories that I can't wait to talk about. Kentucky Fried Chicken. Look, I mean, he was old. Not really, but he started what he was doing at what we would perceive as old. And look at Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? So you have to stop and think, Estee Lauder. I mean, all the stories, they're so amazing. And it also goes back to, again, believing in yourself and all the things that we've been talking about. But we're looking forward to that episode. That's going to be a really good one.
It's going to be fun.
But thank you so much for joining us again and supporting us. Don't forget to like us on all social media.
Yep. Turn on all those notifications.
Oh, the notifications. Yeah, that's important so you know when we drop our next episode. And again, thank you so much for your support. We do appreciate it very much and look forward to seeing you next time.